Welcome to my world. This is another time, another day in the journey towards more educational health knowledge acquisition. Health is wealth, knowledge is power. I am here to impart more knowledge on health matters. Today I've chosen the topic, obesity. Obesity knowledge and laboratory diagnosis. Obesity is a bit difficult to define, but it is more ascribed to having fats. So when you are talking of obesity, you are talking of weight, and the type of weight, overweight you have is more of fats. Because when you look at some athletes, they could be overweight when you look at the BMI, but the weight is more of the proteinous part, that is muscles, and less of fats. But where the weight is more of fats, then it is surely a situation of definition of obesity as that fat accumulation in the body. The BMI used to be anything that is over 30 is regarded as being obese, and below you have somebody being overweight up to 24.9 thereabout. Whether the age is also of importance, and this gender is also important in the calculation of one's BMI. But aside the BMI, the circumference of the waist is another factor that is always usually issued. By the time you are able to pull the circumference of the waist and measure it, and you see it's so wide, that shows there is obesity. You can also fold it, and you want to think of the fatty layer. The stretch mark is another mark of one showing sign of being obese. You see so many stretch marks. It's part of the signs of obesity. But I will say that much. The obesity has not really been a problem in the past. One would not be able to say why. Probably the sedentary life we are now living, it's more of the cause. Because those days people are more involved in working and doing physical things than these days that we are more onto computers, sitting around, finding automatic things that are done automatically. So you have very little time to really exercise your body to do any work. And the things we consume these days are genetically altered. So the genetic food will also balloon us up, like you have your Greek foods that are so big and gigantic. So there is no way that will not impact on the people eating that kind of food. The pastoral life is very difficult to find obese people among those who are really nomadic pastoral farmers, because what they do most of the time, they have used up the energy by the walking and moving from one place to the other. But the recent hike in rate of obesity created a serious problem, even in as far back as 1997, when WHO itself declared the pandemic of obesity. But this period that we are in anyway, with the 2020 problem, I think if one should do a study, probably there will be a little reduction in obesity, because the economy of the world situation is really down. But that may not necessarily be so, because no study has been done as regards the present rate of obesity with when you compare before 2020. But regardless, there is that epidemic of obesity. Now, how does the laboratory get involved in all this? The laboratory is linked in a way because all obese people are linked with chronic diseases, and chronic diseases are confirmed definitively by laboratory tests done. Various types of laboratory tests are done to confirm liver problems, heart, cardiovascular disease, even stroke. You talk endless list. So I will take this moment to go into the laboratory diagnosis of those diseases. I will list these diseases that are linked. There are chronic diseases that are linked with obese people. You can hardly find any chronic disease that you cannot link it up with obesity. Even cancer, you find that people who have cancers are likely to be obese. So let us move into the slide on the laboratory diagnosis before we proceed any further to talk about the prevention and probably treatment. Here we move on again. Obesity Knowledge and Lab Diagnosis. This is where we talk about the real sense of the laboratory diagnosis of obesity. WHO definition, first of all. Let's look at how they define it. Overweight and obesity are defined as abnormal or excessive fat accumulation that present a risk to health. It must present a risk to health. You may be fat and you have no issue, but you have to be very careful. That's one thing. The body mass is a very useful tool to really help define whether you are obese or not. And if your body mass index is over 25, you are considered overweight. And over 30, you are considered obese. The research has suggested that for some people, genes account for 25% of the predisposing to be overweight. While for others, the genetic influence could be as high as 70 to 80%. And you can then imagine being morbid obese. The World Health Organization in 1997 declared obesity as a major public health problem and a global pandemic. You can imagine a situation where 4 million people are dying each year. So it's a serious health problem. 4th of March every year has been declared as Worldwide Day for Obesity. Now let's look at the body mass index and the weight status. What do we consider? When you are below 18.5 body mass index, you are underweight. You need to eat more so that you can be of normal weight. 18.5 to 20 is normal, while anything above 25 to 29.9 is overweight. Obese starts from 30 or greater, whereas the morbid obesity, which is, like we said, 70 to 80 genetic problem. The childhood obesity rate has been confirmed as the Asian having 9%. You can imagine what they really eat. They don't eat, especially when you consider the Japanese. Blacks 24.8, Hispanic. This source is the CDC. Laboratory diagnosis is this is where we now really talk more about what is the risk of being obese. You know, to be obese may not, those days they consider it as something while you are feeding well and what have you. But the disposition to sickness is the problem. And when you now look at those bad lipoprotein as being diagnostic of serious cardiovascular problem, you want to really check for the lipid profile, because cardiovascular problem is a major cause of stroke and even death that is common with obese people. The heart problem, seriously. So once you have a fatty liver, that's part of the problem, and fatty heart, which you can easily test by doing lipid profile test. It will bring out the triglycerides and the lipoproteins. The very low density lipoprotein are the dangerous one. Then the thyroid profile is another one, T3 and T4. The metabolism, you can imagine the rate of metabolism that happens, and it predisposes people to being obese as well as diabetic. So once you have thyroid function disorder, it's a kind of sign. This is also another measurement that the laboratory could go to. The cortisol test. This 8-hour test is used to measure urine level of cortisol, which controls blood sugar. Sugar is a very serious factor in obesity, like I had earlier said. The high calorie there is what really is stored as fats and cause the fatty problem we see with obese people. You can also do the blood sugar, fasting and postprandial, and hemoglobin A1C, which really is more diagnostic. Elevated serum level of CRP, HS, highly sensitive CRP, are associated with increased body weight, and that is what you expect, anything greater than 2.0. Studies have also shown that obesity is positively correlated with raised CRP and ESR. Both are indications of serious inflammatory problem. Measuring growth hormone and insulin-like growth factor early could pinpoint what one needs to do with such a child. If a child measurement, very early, the growth hormones and the insulin-like growth factor 1 is measured, it could be helpful in early diagnosis of a likely situation of the child having serious weight problem. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure you enjoyed that slide section on laboratory diagnosis and also talking about the little aspect that helps to delineate the BMI, the mass index, but nevertheless, let's talk now of what we can do to prevent it. We know obesity could be genetic. That is, when you are talking of those who have high peak hormones those days, we thought, and I'm sure that could be corrected in a way. But there are people, when it's familiar, there are people who are prone to it. So there is a need for them to, as early as possible, know they have to control their intakes, their calories intake. When we talk of calories, whatever food you eat has calorie, that is the energy that has to be the food we produce. List of food we have: carbohydrates, fats, protein, and the minerals and co. It is carbohydrate that has the highest calories, followed by fats, and then you talk about protein. But the calories, when you eat too much carbohydrate and you are not doing enough exercise, enough activities, then it is stored as fat, another storage, another problem. And you can then imagine the size of that person not having muscles but fat. When you talk about protein, protein is a building block. It builds the body. So it produces less energy, and that will not be stored as fat because you eat more of protein. The calories, if by chance is converted, then you will have less experience of fatty storage. But the one that is to be avoided mainly is carbohydrate, high carbohydrate. Carbohydrate, if you want to be on carbohydrate diet, then you must know that you must have activities, physical exercises, and so many other things that you want to do. And be mindful that if you are over stressing your insulin, the production, if it's familiar, there may become a time that the cells of the body are even resistant to the insulin produced. So it is wiser for one to consume less carbohydrate, and that is one way of preventing obesity. Then we can also talk of the kind of work one does. Then also we can talk of treatments, the list of treatments. Let's go into this slide so that we can have a fuller detail of what we are supposed to do. Now let's talk about prevention and the measures taken. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, over 42% of American adults are considered obese. This is a serious pandemic, whether we like it or not, because once you are obese, you are harboring one or two chronic diseases. And if the health situation cause pandemic diseases, then you are already having a situation in our hands. And WHO also has to come to the rescue by suggesting limiting unhealthy food, especially refined grains, sweets, potatoes, and red meat. Policies to reduce obesity are summarized below. Warning labels on food so that people know, just like you have warning labels on cigarette packs, that cigarette is dangerous to health. Food is also now considered some food are unhealthy, so they are not supposed to be advertised without warnings. Restriction on sales of unhealthy food, information campaign, just like we are having now, so that people know more about eating less carbohydrate, more protein, and watching their calories. Calories is a problem when you are talking of obesity. Subsidization and promotion of healthy food. When you subsidize healthy food, when healthy food are cheaper, then there is that chance that people will patronize and eat more healthy food instead of unhealthy food. But can that happen in Africa or all these poverty-stricken country where the head of their leaders do not really put the health of their citizens in the front burner? Treatments. Weight loss drugs approved by U.S. Food and Drug Administration for treating obesity include beta-methyl phenylethylamine, also called fasting. This is a stimulant that increases fat metabolism. When you increase fat metabolism, it means you burn the fats up, and that should help reduce the weight problem and reduce fats that will clog the blood vessels, cause coagulation, cause stroke, cardiovascular diseases. You are also talking of drugs that works by blocking about 30% of dietary fat from being absorbed. So it's still working in the same way of preventing cardiovascular disease. There is also the one that is appetite suppressant, because more of this morbid problem of obesity has to do with their appetite, very strong appetite, and like it's always said, carbohydrate are sweets, and people tend to be addicted to it because the more you take, the more you want to take. And also another appetite suppressant. We can also talk of medication, an important part, especially for the morbid obesity treatment. These are people whose BMI are over 40. Like you have people who cannot even do the exercises. If you are obese or you are overweight, you can still do exercises, but there are people who find it difficult to even move, and because the obesity has really affected them. So such people, you give medication has serious side effects, so surgery may be the only solution. Many people who are morbidly obese and who have been unsuccessful in losing and keeping up the weight opt for bariatric or weight loss surgery. Bariatric surgery, which involves sealing off most of the stomach, sealing it off to reduce the quantity of food you can consume. That is the secret, so that the less calories you take, you'll be able to keep your weight. Can be an effective means of morbidly obese people to lose weight and maintain that weight loss. Thank you for listening.